It's the mystery gripping the world. An airliner vanishes without trace.
There has been nothing remotely like MH370 in the modern era.
For the families, the agony of not knowing.
No family should ever have to undergo day after day of not knowing where their loved one is alive.
Is this a new and deadly threat?
If this is a cyber hijack, it's not only a significant new form of warfare, it fits the pattern of where warfare is going.
Flight MH370, 14 days that gripped the world.
The disappearance of Flight 370 is not a game changer, it's a world changer.
It's 14 days since Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 disappeared. What could be the most significant breakthrough so far came 48 hours ago from the search operation in Australia.
The Australian Maritime Safety Authority has received information based on satellite imagery of objects possibly related to the search. Following specialist analysis of this satellite imagery, 2 possible objects related to the search have been identified.
Search planes and ships are now in the area where the satellites picked up the image. It's over 1,500 miles from Perth. The hope is this is the answer.
A modern airliner has never gone missing for this long before. It's causing a lot of speculation. It's causing a lot of opinion to be generated. I think the riddle of flight MH370 is one that will continue until we find the remains of the aircraft.
The mystery begins after midnight on March the 8th. MH370 leaves Kuala Lumpur for Beijing. The crew settle down for the 6-hour journey as passengers doze, getting what rest they can. An hour later, as it leaves Malaysian airspace, the co-pilot tells air traffic control, "All right, good night." These are the last words anyone heard from the 239 people on board. Minutes later, it vanishes. Beijing, 6:30 a.m. Relatives and friends gather to meet the flight. They are told only that the plane has been delayed. But it fast becomes apparent this is much more serious. People are taken to a city hotel, but they still don't know what's going on.
Nobody has told us anything. Nobody talks to us except volunteers and hotel staff.
Finally, their worst fears confirmed.
Malaysia Airlines confirmed that this flight, MH370, lost contact with Subang Air Traffic Control.
Officials have no idea where the plane is.
We do not have any findings at this point in time. The search and rescue team has started since morning. Everyone has put in an effort, and yet we have not found any wreckage, no wreckage whatsoever.
As Malaysia wakes up to the news, people gather in Kuala Lumpur Airport, desperate to learn the fate of friend and family, but nothing is forthcoming. But this we do know. The plane took off from Kuala Lumpur at 20 past midnight local time on Saturday, March 8th, due to arrive in Beijing just over 6 hours later at 6:30 a.m. At 1:19, the final good night transmission to Malaysian air traffic control. Less than 10 minutes later, 1:30 in the morning, it disappears from air traffic control radar. As the search intensifies, an international effort swings into action. A flotilla of vessels scour the ocean. Above, planes also search for the 300-ton aeroplane. The US 7th Fleet joins in, aware time is running out.
As every hour goes by, the search area gets bigger and bigger. A person can survive in the water for at least 72 hours due to sheer willpower. After that, the chances of survival get less and less, and that's what we're concerned with right now.
Despite their best efforts, nothing. There are reports an oil rig worker sees a fireball in the sky near where the flight disappeared. The Malaysian Air Force pick up an unidentified radar signal. An oil slick is spotted off the coast of Vietnam. Analysis later proves it came from a ship. Then a promising breakthrough. What appears to be a door floating in the water. It turns out to be a cable reel. For the relatives of those on board, the agony intensifies.
We have communicated to the family members that after more than 30 hours without any contact with the aircraft, we believe that the family members should prepare themselves for the work.
And as each day goes by, without knowing what happened to their loved ones, the sense of loss only gets worse.
After 7 days of not locating the aircraft, it's unprecedented in civil aviation history.
Then, a startling announcement. Investigators are certain whatever happened to the plane was not an accident.
These movements are consistent with deliberate action by someone on the plane.
Shortly after MH370 loses contact, Malaysian military radar observes it taking a sharp left turn to the west, later confirmed by the Thai military. Even more startling is the news a satellite was still picking up signals from the aircraft a full 7 hours after it went missing.
The plane's last communication with a satellite was in one of two possible corridors.
They give no precise location, but indicate two key areas. One, a northern corridor stretches from the Kazakhstan-Turkmenistan border to northern Thailand. The second, southern corridor, is a vast swathe of the Indian Ocean.
The Malaysian authorities have refocused their investigation into the crew and passengers on board. Despite media reports that the plane was hijacked, I wish to be very clear. We are still investigating all possibilities as to what caused MH370 to deviate from its original flight path.
One suspicion is the plane has been commandeered or hijacked.
If we go back to sort of the Cuban hijack style, the Arab gunmen hijacks of the 70s, we kind of think that's a phase of terrorism that's behind us, but it's never really gone away. This could be a change in tactic from the terrorists. It could be a classic hijack, we just don't know.
Another possibility is pilot suicide.
There'll be psychological profiling of the crew carried out by experts looking into their background. They'll be looking at their political, family, social, financial, religious, every area of their lives will be looked at.
An emergency could have forced the crew to head for the nearest airport.
A catastrophic failure would be something that none of the flight deck had experienced before. I think the flight crew probably made a valiant effort to get the aeroplane onto a new course to safety.
Whatever happened, attention at this point is on the crew. Were they heroes or villains? The captain was a grandfather who loved his job. His co-pilot was about to propose to his girlfriend, also a pilot.
The question is there something extraordinary that has actually gone wrong with the crew? Has something affected them in some way? And therefore this was not actually malign intent? We're really rather stuffed for a motive. So yeah, say the pilots are in the spotlight if you like, Personally, what I'd say is that everything's in the spotlight.
And that spotlight is turned on 3 million square miles. A vast expanse in which to try and find something, even when it's the size of an airliner. The Boeing 777 is the world's largest twin-engine passenger jet. It entered commercial service in 1995. Mechanical failure is unlikely.
The 777 has a fantastic safety record. It's had one fatal accident in 20 years of operation, so it was surprising to hear that there'd been an event. I was not surprised that there were no initial reports that confirmed what that event was, but as the days went on, then that does become surprising that there's nothing at all.
The engineering standards of today's aeroplanes are absolutely unparalleled. Aeroplanes have never been so good. If there was a catastrophic physical failure of the engines or the aircraft would have fallen where it was and we would have found the wreckage already.
When flight MH370 takes off, the weather's good. The sky's clear, so an act of God is highly unlikely. So what could possibly have happened to the passenger jet?
There are at least 50 theories out there. Many of those theories are by Boeing pilots and experts and accident investigators. But again, until you've got the evidence, it's only a theory.
It may be confusing to see so many theories evolving about the loss of an aircraft, and it's a very technical issue. But all of those theories are actually very useful, and it's not conspiracy theory, but all of the side theories might put light on an unusual situation. So the forensic scientists who've got very open minds have to incorporate everything that's sort of coming out.
As day 2 comes to an end, the world, and especially the families, need information. A possible lead. The authorities home in on 2 suspicious passengers. Could these CCTV images be the key to unlocking the fate of MH370? In the aftermath of the disappearance of flight MH370, people fear the worst.
A hijack in this day and age really is of no surprise to the aviation security community.
I think no one can rule out foul play at this stage, and that could be anything from a terrorist attack across to an act of sabotage.
And new technology brings new threats.
Until it's disproven, this is potentially a cyber hijack.
Day 2, and the Malaysian and Vietnamese search effort focuses on an area 20 miles around the last known position of the plane. Investigators remain baffled how a 300-ton passenger plane could disappear so suddenly with no distress call from the pilot.
There is nothing in aviation's history that is quite like this. We have no answers, so we are completely in the dark.
One possible explanation is the plane has been brought down by a terrorist bomb, similar to the one that destroyed Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie in 1988, killing 270 people. As in the case of MH370, there was no distress call, and the plane disappeared from radar screens instantaneously.
There's a lot of rumour and speculation, and indeed you can see that some things come out and then they're denied and then they come out again. It takes time for the whole team to process things. They want to give out facts. You have Kuala Lumpur, which is several hours ahead of London time. There's a British accident investigator working on this in relation to the engines. You have Boeing based in Seattle. So anything may well take 24 hours to verify, just in the way that the information goes around the world in a global manner. So there's obviously a process to release the information.
One striking new piece of information is that 2 passengers were traveling under assumed identities.
We have the CCTV's recording of those passengers from check-in right to the departure point.
Pouria Norma Hamadi and Syed Mohammed Reza Delavar were photographed boarding the flight using stolen passports. And examination of radar records suggests the plane might have unexpectedly changed course.
There is a possibility that this aircraft made a turn back, but we are not sure whether it is the same aircraft.
If this is true, who changed the plane's course and why? Having tracked down the genuine passport holders, the police reveal their 2 suspects are Iranian. Could they be linked to terrorism in the Middle East? The broadcast of a TV interview in Australia draws attention to flight deck security. Jonty Roos, a South African, claims to have spent an entire flight in the cockpit with MH370 co-pilot Fareeq Abdul Hamid in 2011.
They were talking to us. They were actually smoking throughout the flight, which I don't think they're allowed to be doing. At one stage, they were pretty much turned around in their seats talking to us, and they were so engaged in conversation that he took my friend's hand and he was looking at her palm and said, "Oh, your hand's very creased, that means you're a very creative person."
Passengers have been banned from cockpits since the 9/11 attack, a measure to prevent the terrorist takeover of planes.
I think it's highly likely a hijack took place. And again, there's 4 options for the hijack. One is a hijack of the aircraft through a crew member. The second option is a hijack coming from a passenger. A third option, which is a fairly unusual one, would be a stowaway. Then, of course, the 4th option is an electronic takeover of the aircraft from a ground-based station.
But then a surprise announcement. The Malaysian police declare one of the men was seeking asylum in Europe.
We believe that he is not likely to be a member of any terrorist group. And we believe that he is trying to migrate to Germany.
In the absence of hard facts, new theories emerge. From the plane being accidentally shot down by the military to cyber terrorism.
The cyber attack would be a highly sophisticated attack, which at the moment would seem the most unlikely, but that's only because we haven't seen it before. The day before 9/11, we never would have imagined that an aircraft would have been used effectively as a cruise missile to attack New York and Washington. But of course that happened. So that possibility cannot be ruled out, and nor can the possibility of one of the crew members, for whatever reason, taking over the aircraft.
According to this theory, the plane's main computer network could be accessed and compromised via a mobile phone app or a USB connection in the flight entertainment system.
This is potentially a cyber hijack where the use of a computer to actually simulate the pilot's activities has taken that plane off course and actually controlled every action of that plane, and potentially may have lost the plane or could have landed the plane. A cyber hijack really is a new form of warfare, and it's taking us into cyberspace where actually all forms of warfare are now concentrating on.
Day 6. And a report from the Wall Street Journal reveals startling new evidence.
The Journal is exclusively reporting that U.S. investigators believe missing flight Malaysian Airlines 370 flew for an additional 4 hours after losing contact.
They claim to have information that the plane had flown on after it disappeared from the radar.
Several hours ago, we reported that the Malaysian 777 appears to have flown on for an additional 4 hours after it was last seen by officials. And that was determined through a continual monitoring of the engines that happened even after the transponder stopped broadcasting for whatever reason in the early hours of Saturday morning over the Gulf of Thailand.
This new information raises perplexing questions. If the plane continued flying, who switched off the radar transponders? And where is the plane now? Malaysian authorities are swift to respond.
As far as Rolls-Royce and Boeing are concerned, those reports are inaccurate.
The Wall Street Journal retracts its report, saying they had made an error and issues a correction. The information did not come from the engines, but from the plane's satellite communication link, a system designed to automatically transmit the status of the onboard systems.
It was a non-specific satellite signal. They know it came from the aeroplane, but it wasn't like a transponder response which gave a whole load of identification. They just happened to know that it was that aircraft, but there was no information in this ping. It was just a ping.
Later that day, the White House announces that the search may need to be extended to the Indian Ocean. It adds credibility to the theory that the plane continued flying after it disappeared. If the theory is true, the plane could have flown for an additional distance of 2,200 miles. As the search area expands to an area of almost 3 million square miles, investigators turn their attention to the plane itself. If mechanical failure is responsible, it would not be the first time. It's been 7 days since Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 mysteriously disappeared in mid-air. Planes and ships scour the ocean, but find nothing, while desperate relatives wait for any news of their loved ones. As the likelihood of an act of terrorism appears to lessen, the focus of the investigators turns to mechanical failure. If the plane did turn back, this could be the reason why. But on the surface of it, this doesn't seem likely.
The safety record of the 777 for this generation of aeroplane is superb. It's an extremely robust aeroplane, it handles exceptionally well, and it has a lot of inbuilt features that prevent the flight crew from abusing the aeroplane in a way that some of them may carelessly do.
However, mechanical failure, even on new planes like this, is not unheard of.
It's quite difficult to make 300 tons of metal disappear without trace, but it has happened before. If you look at 20 years of airline disasters and accidents, more often than not, it is actually an operational or a mechanical problem with the aircraft.
In June 2009, Air France 447, a Boeing Airbus, disappeared over the Atlantic, and mechanical failure was to blame.
That aircraft had 228 people on board, and it was over the South Atlantic going to Paris at 36,000 feet, and it just simply vanished. And it took some time, about a week, for some of the wreckage to be spotted on the surface.
A thorough investigation found the plane crashed because of ice forming in the tubes that measure the airspeed. This caused the autopilot to disconnect, and a sudden reduction in lift which the pilots were unable to correct. In this case, they failed to respond to mechanical failure as they should. Could the same have happened with flight MH370?
There are a lot of comparisons that can be made with the Air France 447 accident. The circumstances, you can make comparisons, but that doesn't necessarily mean the cause is going to turn out to be the same. The number of possibilities for what can go wrong with an aeroplane are so many, we're in the realms of hundreds. Most of them are incredibly improbable. At the moment, when that aircraft went missing, we had no indication of any malfunction whatsoever.
I think the starting point is, in accidents like this, it is usually a chain of causes.
The Boeing 777 has had some problems in the past. You may remember the British Airways Flight 38 Boeing 777 that crash-landed at Heathrow in 2008. That was due to problems with the fuel system and the fuel freezing. After that, the fuel system was redesigned in part, and so hopefully that is no longer a problem.
Mayday, mayday. Aircraft accident, aircraft accident.
But it certainly was a problem back in 2008. Both engines on the plane failed.
The position is the threshold, runway 27 left. Aircraft type is a 777. Nature problem is crash.
Paul Stafford, a former lecturer at Kingston University in Surrey, was on that plane.
The oxygen mass fell from the roof of the aircraft, and we seemed to be skidding for an eternity, bumping and bashing around. I smashed my head in the front of the seat. I hit my knee on the seat. I buckled my body in half. My chest was hurting. We eventually stopped, and it was completely quiet. I looked to my left, and the undercarriage had come through the wing. And at that point, the captain did say, "Evacuate, evacuate." And that's the first time, the first moment I realised how serious it had been. It was terrible.
The BA flight had suffered total engine failure. But even if this had happened to the missing Malaysian plane, at 30,000 feet it would have been able to glide for about 20 minutes, allowing plenty of time for the pilot to make an emergency call. Day 8 of the mystery of the disappearing plane. A press conference is called in Kuala Lumpur. Now the Malaysian Prime Minister, Najib Razak, makes a dramatic announcement.
The Royal Malaysian Air Force primary radar data showed that an aircraft which was believed but not confirmed to be MH370 did indeed turn back.
So for the first time, the Malaysian authorities formally announced the plane does seem to have diverted from its planned route over the Gulf of Thailand and headed west, back over the Malaysian peninsula. This points to deliberate intent by whoever was flying the plane. And a further announcement from Prime Minister Razak seems to confirm this.
We can say with a high degree of certainty that the aircraft communications, addressing and reporting system was disabled.
Like other planes, this flight was fitted with what's known as ACARS, Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System. It allows the computers on the plane to relay to computers on the ground all kinds of ongoing technical information about the condition of the plane. The ACARS system was turned off. And this doesn't just involve a switch in the cockpit. It requires someone with technical knowledge to remove circuit breakers. Suddenly, mechanical failure is looking less plausible. But, to add to the confusion, as this news breaks, there's a flurry of speculation on the internet about there having been cracks reported in the fuselage of the aircraft.
There have been some recent airworthiness directives, which are safety directives made by the regulators in America, that refer to the fuselage of the Boeing 777, and in particular to the structural integrity to a certain part.
These cracks were reported at the crown of the fuselage, near the plane's aerial. Could the cracks have led to a decompression of the aircraft, rendering passengers and crew unconscious, or even its sudden breakup?
Know that it's a coincidence. Airworthiness directives are issued all the time, literally daily. This one just happened to coincide with the disappearance of this aircraft.
If there was a loss of pressurization to the extent that the crew became incapacitated through hypoxia, Long before that ever happened, they would have had an alarm go off on the flight deck. There are gongs and lights, big red lights flashing away, and the hooter that goes off for depressurization, you would not sleep through it, let me assure you.
In modern aeroplanes, they have so many backup systems that the likelihood of a system's failure bringing an aircraft down without the pilots having time to tell air traffic control that they were in distress it's unthinkable. The idea that a Boeing 777 could suddenly have a wing drop off or some major structural failure, again, that sort of thing happened back in the 1940s. It doesn't happen any longer.
So again, focus is directed upon some deliberate action. This is of little comfort to the grieving relatives who simply want to know. But deliberate action seems more likely when it's confirmed that shortly after the ACARS was disabled, the plane's transponder was switched off. This sends signals to civilian air traffic controllers.
The aircraft has gone missing at the point of maximum confusion, which is the handover between two international air traffic control service providers over an ocean. This can give you, say, 15 minutes to make good your escape before anybody even starts to question whether you've actually gone missing at that point in time. The aircraft is then flown along the borderline between Malaysia and its northern border, which again indicates that perhaps the pilot or somebody with a lot of flight technical knowledge and air traffic control knowledge understands how to hide this aeroplane. And then it's alleged at the moment that the aeroplane is flying at 29,500 feet, which is quite often used as a borderline between two vertical segments of air traffic control. So effectively it's threading its way between four boxes that are stacked together exactly down the middle line, so that everybody will assume it's somebody else's problem.
If the plane continued out into the Indian Ocean, it could then have been brought down deliberately. But if it has crashed, shouldn't it be possible to locate it because of the signals from its black box?
To find it, if it's gone underwater, one of the things that you would use is this beacon here, which emits a signal for at least 30 days. You have to have some idea of where the accident site is. So depending on things like the depth of the water, temperature of the water, you may be able to pick this up from only about 5 miles away. But we're talking about a large area of sea here, and if you try and send down perhaps a remote operated vehicle, a mini submarine, try and find it, you have to have a pretty good idea where you're looking, or you have to be very lucky.
This is why it took 2 years to uncover the black box of Air France 447. But now, the Wall Street Journal story about the satellite ping comes into play.
It's about once every hour the satellite just sends a message to say, "Hi, are you still there?" And the aircraft will reply, "Yes, I'm still here." And that's how the authorities in the region have been able to confirm that the aircraft was still transmitting these signals for up to about 7 hours after the last transmission.
This information cannot pinpoint the plane, but it gives the angle of the plane in relation to the satellite. This, investigators are now able to place the aircraft in one of two corridors. A northern corridor going from Thailand towards Kazakhstan, and a southern one leading out into the Indian Ocean. At this point, search efforts in the South China Sea are wound down.
If it had gone up the northerly corridor, the chances are that the amount of military radars in that area would have detected the aircraft.
It may have been seen by the military, who say, well, it's just an airliner at 30,000 feet. What's the problem? The Civil Air Traffic Control Authority should be talking to it. The Civil Air Traffic Control Authority might think, well, it's a military aeroplane, or indeed not detected if they don't have primary radar display shown. So it's quite possible to progress through some of these countries without actually alerting suspicion.
Day 9. The number of countries involved in the search has expanded from 14 to 25. The two air corridors encompass a vast area. And as the search area expands, reasons for the plane's disappearance remain just as obscure.
It's not just going on a murder hunt without the body. It's actually trying to find the weapon before you know there's been a murder.
By now, all crew members and all passengers are under investigation. Was there anyone on that plane with psychological problems? Hijacking and sabotage remain on the table, but inevitably, the spotlight falls on the pilot and the co-pilot. Do they hold the key to the secret of flight MH370? And then, some dramatic news from Australia. Day 13, and in the biggest search in aviation history, there is a major development. A potentially important sighting of two objects are picked up by satellite 1,500 miles off the southwest coast of Perth, Australia.
It's very close to the predicted southern flight corridor, and that, I suppose, reinforces our suspicion that just maybe this is the first tangible evidence that we've got.
But if it is the missing plane, how did it get there, and why? The Malaysian authorities have confirmed that the plane's tracking devices and communication systems had been deliberately disabled, shifting the focus of the investigation onto the pilots. These are the last CCTV images of the captain and co-pilot as they go through airport security before boarding flight MH370.
They're looking into the background of the pilots and the daily life of the pilots to find out whether there might have been any reason for psychological instability.
The investigators will be calling on specialist psychologists to undertake this type of work, who both understand the local culture as well as the psychological implications. So a lot of background data gathering will be going on, lots of people will be being interviewed, and they obviously want to focus on those with technical knowledge or those who've been picking up technical knowledge over the last few months.
A veteran pilot, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, joined Malaysia Airlines in 1981. Married with 3 grown-up children, he was renowned for his professionalism.
He was one of the original 777 fleet captains. You know, he's a great guy, you know, just a great pilot. You know, I think it attests to his experience. It was 18,000 hours of flying, great career.
This is a YouTube video that I made as a community service.
An aviation fanatic, he had even built a flight simulator in his home which mirrored the setup of the Boeing 777 he was piloting. This quickly caught the attention of the Malaysian authorities.
We took possession of a simulator, of a flight simulator, and we have dismantled it from the home, and we have assembled it at our office, and we are getting experts to look at it now.
Have him check and fix the leakage.
It's revealed that data on that simulator had been deleted before the captain took control of the flight.
When files are deleted from a simulator, it may mean that the size of the files is so large that one cleans the system as one goes. But the authorities are getting those files unlocked. They will undelete them, and that may take a little time. But forensically, that is going to be very exciting for the investigation, because it may show exactly the types of very innocent assessments that that pilot was doing, or it may show an intention, for a psychological reason perhaps, to create this different pathway that this plane has gone.
The pilot's political beliefs are also under scrutiny. On Monday, it is revealed he was a public supporter of Malaysian opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim, who was given a jail sentence just hours before the plane disappeared.
Perhaps they have a theory that you know, he was very, very depressed, and therefore he caused the aircraft to crash. That might be one theory. And so they might be trying to ascertain, was he really depressed at the time, and what would be reasons that would be causing him to want to take his life.
The state of mind of the co-pilot is also being investigated. Doubt was cast on his character when it was revealed that he had broken flight rules by inviting 2 women into the cockpit during a flight in 2011.
The areas that are going to be looked at is the sort of almost the roguish nature of the first officer that's being portrayed in the press in terms of, you know, his affairs with girls and things like that. But I think that will turn out just to be a young man you know, with normal desires.
And on Monday, there is further news on the co-pilot.
Initial investigation indicated it was the co-pilot who basically spoke the last time it was recorded on tape.
But his cockpit sign-off, "All right, good night," was not the recognized air drill and has raised suspicions.
The goodbye by the co-pilot was an unusually casual one. There was no use of the aircraft's own call sign. Even if you were going to use the word good night, you'd follow it up with your call sign so that the air traffic controllers know who's saying good night.
So, could the pilots have committed suicide? Although there is no indication at this stage this is pilot suicide, such incidents are not unheard of. In 1997, a Silkair flight crashed in Indonesia, killing 104 people. US investigators said the pilot had probably crashed the jet on purpose. The US findings contradicted an Indonesian investigation which rejected suicide theory. And in 1999, 217 people died when an Egypt Air flight from New York crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. Again, US investigators concluded pilot suicide, but the Egyptian investigators have consistently disputed this.
The physical evidence that was available to the investigators included the fact that there was only one pilot's DNA on the flight deck. The flight deck door was locked at the time of the accident. The other pilot's DNA was on the far side of the cockpit door, as was the fire axe.
But did the pilots commandeer the plane with evil intent, or were they undertaking a desperate effort to preserve the lives of the passengers on board?
Has something affected them in some way, and therefore this was not actually malign intent? You know, do we know it's malign intent? No, we don't.
With his character and what we knew of him, it just wouldn't make any sense that he would have anything to do with any sort of deliberate action on his part.
I believe at that stage there was some form of catastrophic failure on the aeroplane, either a decompression or perhaps an electrical fire which incapacitated the flight crew. I think the flight crew probably made a valiant effort to get the aeroplane onto a new course to safety. Whatever his attempts were, I believe that he probably lost consciousness before he could carry them out successfully, and the rest of the flight was carried out on autopilot, with the autopilot functioning as it would without any form of monitoring.
Day 10, and the search focus moves from the northern corridor to the southern Indian Ocean, one of the remotest places on Earth.
The theory to do with no passengers being able to communicate out from the aeroplane tends to indicate that it may have crashed in the sea. And if it was going to be a deliberate act by anybody on board the aeroplane to crash the aeroplane in the sea, then you would choose to put it as far into the Indian Ocean as you could possibly get.
With the dramatic news that 2 objects have been picked up by radar off the southwest coast of Perth, Australia, 4 long-range surveillance planes are immediately scrambled to search the area where the objects were spotted. Could these images be the key to unlocking the mystery that for the last 14 days has gripped the world? The fate of MH370 has become one of the most perplexing aviation mysteries of modern times. Another day of searching reveals nothing, and as it continues, confidence in aircraft safety is being tested.
Every bit of information that's coming out is going to make aviation safer, but it's important that this time of uncertainty is closed down very quickly, and we're not waiting for several years for a plane to be brought out from under the ocean.
For the increasingly desperate families of the missing passengers, the nightmare continues. Their distress increasing with each passing day. As the mystery of flight MH370 continues, one thing is for sure: the aviation industry will never be the same again.
LL Cool J and Chris O'Donnell step up to tackle another mystery here on Channel 5. Stay tuned for new NCIS Los Angeles coming up next.